privilege and honor to invite His Excellency Bala Mohammed to the podium. His Excellency has worked in several federal ministries, including internal affairs and solid minerals, power, steel, transportation, and aviation. He's been in the Nigerian Railway Corporation. He attended the University of Maiduguri, where he got a bachelor's degree in English, and has been a journalist sometime in his past life. Dr. Bala Mohammed is a Nigerian politician who is the governor of Bauchi State. He was also a minister for the Federal Capital Territory from 2010 to 2015. He was also a senator between 2007 and 2010 and belongs to the People's Democratic Party. You're welcome, Your Excellency. My second panelist is joining Professor Joy Ezeilo, the Law Professor, Emeritus Dean of Law, and we welcome Joya, University of Nigeria, and former United Nations Special Rapporteur on Trafficking in Persons, especially women and children, between 2008 and 2014. Professor Joy is also a member of the United Nations Civil Society Advisory Board on Prevention of Sexual Exploitation and Abuse. She founded the Women Aid Collective. She is a winner of the National Human Rights Award in Nigeria and has been recognized internationally in many, many ways, holding the national honor of the Order of the Niger for her work in activism and contribution to human development. She is currently the Deputy Chairperson of the African Women's Leadership Network Nigerian chapter. Welcome, Professor Joy Ezeilo. His Excellency, Governor of Ekiti State, Professor Dr. Kayode Fayemi, is unfortunately not with us today. However, he has sent a very capable representative to stand in his stead, and we have the honor of inviting Senator Olubimi Adetunbi to take his role. Senator Olubimi is the chairman of the Senate Committee on National Planning and Economic Affairs. Governor Fayemi had this to say. He said the awareness that nothing in nation building is finalized should give us hope and challenge us to do better and constantly look for ways and means of building a better country. By experimentation, by trial, by learning, by error, by setting and by resetting. Your Excellency, this is the story of how we reset Nigeria. How do we recreate a different model of who we are and begin to make it work for all of us? Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. First, I must thank the chairman of this very important foundation, my boss and my mentor, the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, Dr. Goodluck, and all members of the foundation, and indeed Nigeria for this opportunity. I was here privileged to listen to a prolific professor who gave a keynote address, Professor Bala, and I will see that the whole problems and challenges of nation building in the African continent was on his mind. And I came at the nick of time when discussions were being held on the issues of diversity, on politics, and of course inclusiveness. Prof, what you have raised is an issue of how do we create national renewal? How do we go forward from where we are? We know that today, Nigeria is on the brink, with so many sections of the country pulling apart. Maybe because of perception, maybe because of genuine explosion, maybe because of nepotism, maybe because of the style of leadership. We are here celebrating an icon in the person of Goodluck. This is leadership. We lost election in 2015, and I was privileged to accompany him to Tokyo. We were feeling too bad, but he took it as a hero, and he knew that democracy is about losing or winning. So the first port of call is for us to know as Democrats, as elites, that it is not a do or die, and that's what democracy is all about. And of course, somebody described all the political class as a clan in the morning, Senate President. There was no ideology dividing us, and yet we have so many problems and challenges. So the issue is about leadership. How do we create inclusive leadership where everybody looks up to a person? If we were routed out in 2015 because we were all names, includedness, lack of this and that, how are we now celebrating this kind of leadership at the person that we are very generative? And that's why it is always honest and sincere for us to test our steps. And you know that nobody has a monopoly of knowledge. Someone has also said, even the political parties, they are not just providing the kind of impetus that we require. So we have to invent, we have to look forward to bringing in people from all sections of the country where each and every one of us will have a sense of belonging. And that is why we have to rediscover. How do we rediscover? We need a national conference. We need dialogue like this. We need to structure ourselves. Structuring does not mean that you will be excluded because we have economically disadvantaged. How do we even share the national asset? Today we are always fighting sharing our federation account, where some people felt VAT is not supposed to be shared because of fighting legislation and so on and so forth. And those that are producing the oil and the gas wells are not benefiting from it. Some of us abnormals have been seen as parasites, whereas we believe that we have so many resources in the mineral sector and in the human capital. So, Madam, I believe is about the national resource. We need to really sit down and dialogue and to restructure the country in such a manner that every section of the country will feel a sense of belonging, where mistrust and suspicion will be done away with, where the elites will know that we are the endangered species, that we are not leading very well, where the subnationals and the local authorities will be able to give them good governance. Given the situation at the moment, even the federal government is doing better than the states and local governments, because there is no inclusiveness in some of the states. There is no use of resources as it should be. There is no transparency. Arbitrariness is being used at every level. We should be able to use little resources and do too much. The way we are doing in Bauchi, freeing resources, using little resources to develop infrastructure and services. I think I was not here so that I can give opportunity to my colleagues so that they can go from where I step and stop on.
Thank you very much, Excellency. I think you've been very lucky throughout this day to listen to quite a number of the governors and to know their positions on what it takes to rebuild our country. Professor, maybe I'll start with Senator to ask. The question itself is one of leadership. The management of diversity is also a question of how those who lead that diversity manage it in an inclusive sense. But here we've heard from Dr. Bala about the suspicions, trust, distrust, and all that exists within the country. My question, therefore, is how do we restore the relationship such that there is trust between government and citizens? Can we really talk about managing diversity when there's no trust? What can we do to resolve this? Thank you.
I bring greetings on behalf of Dr. Fayemi, who is unavoidably absent. Representing him here. Mr. President, thank you for bringing this platform into existence in an atmosphere that has a lot of deficit of think tanks compared to other countries of its size. This is a useful addition to the public debate in the country, and I think we deserve a round congratulations on this. Diversity, can it be managed? The answer is yes, but it has to be transparent. And the first law of transparency is disclosure and acceptance of these diversities. In situations where diversity is denied, an open confession of it is regarded as a crime, politically incorrect, and not so popular. The question is, how do you manage what you don't understand, or what you're in denial of? Since the inception of this country, we look at social diversities, economic diversities, and all of these have been subjected to measurements as evidence in the available data that is in the country. Therefore, it is not always in contention when you are looking for 13 million children out of school, because they are measured and we know where they are. We have the national aggregate figures for this, and if you drill that down, you can locate them in the local governments that they come from. Why is that possible? Because there's information, there's data, and there's an acknowledgement of this challenge. In the same vein, economic diversity, not all parts of this country have equal access to economic opportunities. And this is measured. We have a national GDP that everybody knows, and this GDP is being broken down into states, because the national GDP of Nigeria is contributed by the 36 states of the economy. What is Nigeria's economy? It is a combination of the economies of the states. And we are measuring it so you know exactly where heavy lifting is required to lift up economic activities relative to other parts of the country. What is the point I'm making? There are other diversities in our country that are very, very profoundly significant, but are currently not measured. For reasons of political correctness, take for example our census. We're a nation of so-called 200 million people, classified by gender, classified by education, classified by health statistics, human development indicators. We have all this information. Our census statistics, contrary to practices in other countries of the world, Kenya, Ghana, South Africa, United Kingdom, India, Pakistan, in our own census statistics, the subject of ethnicity and religion is excluded. The question is why? How do we manage a people whose configuration and diversity we don't even understand or we are in denial of? The excuse here, we have excuses of avoiding controversy, therefore remove this information from demographic statistics. I'm saying we are not avoiding controversy. We are actually plunging deeper into controversy. How do you manage when there is no information, there is no transparency, there is no boldness to confront the demons that bedevil our country? When are we going to avoid that? Why is it possible for you to be a Briton without denying being a Scot or a Welsh or an Englishman? Why is it that in the World Cup gathering, England will fill the team, Scotland will fill the team, and yet you have a United Kingdom? What is wrong with that? We must learn how to harness our identities into a national asset and energy that produces public good for every citizen, such that the colonial tendencies of ethnicity begins to disappear into a new national narrative that is a product of good governance. This is the contribution of the starting point.
We don't know its configuration. We're not knowing enough about this diversity. We're not even studying it. We're not gathering the kinds of information. We're not even transparent about it. So management is a great problem for us. Thank you for that contribution. Professor Ezeilo, we have heard about what leadership can do. We have heard about the management from the perspective of leaders. But it's also the question of what, and I think Ida spoke a lot about what the citizens themselves can do. How can we rebuild inter-community relationships so that the society is much more stable and much more able to manage its own diversity, irrespective of what government itself is doing?
Thank you so much. While I want to stand on the existing protocol, I would like to acknowledge the former president and importantly the wife also, who have been a very passionate advocate of women's rights. And I want to say that talking about leadership, we're all in agreement, and I'm glad that our panel, because I'm getting tired of us always talking about the problems, is focusing on solution. I think we'll all agree that Nigeria is at a critical crossroads, and that means decision time is now or never. And I think that the problem, not the problem, but I think we should be thinking of the calamity of the diversity, which is part of the conundrum of where we are. And that means we have to interrogate whether we should even still be talking about unity and diversity. I want to differ with you. And that doesn't take away from the fact that we want to use our difference as a political resource, the way distinguished senator has articulated it. But for us to begin to, because what is it? Even when we look at the framework, I'm a lawyer, the constitutional, or a law professor. And when you look at it and say, oh, the constitution say provide for the right, of course there is a framework there. But then, whereas even Nigeria as a nation state has captured internationally the attention, we are still debating local inclusion and lack of it. Think of it. At the international level, United Nations, we have the Deputy Secretary General. At WO, Nigeria is leading. African Development Bank, Nigeria is the head there. African Import-Export is a Nigerian. And many Nigerians are taking appointment from Canada to everywhere in Western Europe. And we can claim they are Nigerians. And here, I'm still struggling, probably as an Igbo and Igbo woman and as a woman, based on my gender, to be heard, to be treated fairly, to be seen as a Nigerian. Definitely is a sad commentary. It is something we should no longer tolerate. And that brings me to the question of the moderator. What about followership? Our problem can be with followership. The demand side is good. Of course, we know that the youth have done a serious attempt with the NSAS, and people can say, oh, they are not organized. I think they are very organized. And we shouldn't patronize them. And the youth made demand, and they articulated what was their problem. It is for us adults that have failed to think in the best interest of Nigeria, and then also assume that we are taking in the best interest of the youth. But when it comes to followership, one thing you will notice is the commonality of behavior, which also reinforce the fact that our ethnicity impacts on our democracy and development. And that's why we need to begin to de-escalate that, de-emphasize that, and quietly find a way out of this. Because then they'll say, oh, it's from my place, then no comment. Even during the NSAS, no comment is certainly because it is from our, it's at our turn, and it's someone from our place. And we must all claim the thing, whether good or bad. And we share the burdens of liabilities, even more than the shared resources or the distribution of wealth that we're talking about. So I think, yes, we need a conscientization, but who is doing that matters. Who is at the forefront of that matters. Recognition of citizens' rights matters, you know, and that sense of belonging. Yes, inclusion, but let us for once spare a thought that whereas we have captured internationally, we are included globally. I've been a United Nations Special Rapporteur on human trafficking, and I'm looking at the former Permanent Secretary and also, importantly, former President of Human Rights Council in Geneva, under my leadership, Dr. Onik, you're here now. And then you recall, these things were based when we had the final list of 3 countries there. One from South Korea, myself, and another from another Eastern Europe. And it was decision time. I was like, okay, maybe South Korean, because the then United Nations Secretary General was from South Korea. But at the end of the day, it was the CV, and I recall you congratulating me and saying, your CV spoke for you. Internationally, it does. But nationally, we are still talking about appointment. They look at appointment, oh, you bring a CV. No. You know, I don't even, some people, it's an open secret. You don't even want to hear about certain people from certain area. Oh, she's an expert here, it doesn't matter. Or it's the turn off. It doesn't matter if the person will bring best expertise. So we're talking of mediocrity. This is mediocre. And how can we be developed? How can we have sustainable democracy? So the followership needs to retain also, as we are dealing with the fact that we don't have courageous and visionary leadership like the Sheikh Mohammed, like the people have mentioned, I don't want to go with those things. But the fact that they are showing those leadership internationally. Today you will see there in the news, but President Olusegun Obasanjo is leading on this initiative in the Horn of Africa. And if he's not doing it well, then tomorrow you hear also that President Jonathan Goodluck has not a number of international ships leading in that. So we have captured the international stage. And that's locally, we are still struggling. I think it's time.
Thank you very much, Professor Joy, for challenging us to the fact that the internal dynamics of how we define ourselves as citizens and how we play out the citizenship is still a work in progress and one we need to pay a lot of attention to. Excellency, let me return back to you. I think Joy made some allusion to the fact that she sees and feels, maybe not personally, but certain persons feel and experience their citizenship very differently. And we do know that it's not a hidden secret in Nigeria, that part of the way the IPOD people are moving is by way of saying, look, we are here, we want to be included, but this is the way we are telling you that we want to be included in a way that doesn't also quite allow all the other people to understand what to do with the situation in which they find themselves. So what I'm trying to say is that in an attempt to manage diversity and ensure diversity, some people have brought about a set of facts which also make the management of that diversity complex and difficult. And we've seen that in recent developments, particularly in the southeastern parts of Nigeria. So therefore my question will be, and you've spoken about restructuring, you've spoken about dialogues, you've spoken about a couple of other ways in which we can rebuild greater inclusivity in our country. What other ways do you think, given what we have seen, is able to deal with this problem? Because this problem is beginning to look like if the less you do and the less you speak about it, the less you work on it, the more problematic it becomes.
And that particular area is not well represented in the either security infrastructure or in the progress of the country. Because we have not developed a point where we say we don't take cognizance of where somebody comes from when he's occupying certain offices. Then the second one that you mentioned, which is very pivotal and very important, which is the issue of security. And of course, self-determination, self-actualization, which will balkanize the country. It started in the northeast with the Boko Haram, and now with IPOD, and we can see the many senses of that self-actualization rearing its head in the southwest. All these aspects that we need to sit down and dialogue. But we must go to the bottom of it, as explained by the Senator. Who are the sponsors of those perceptions or those feelings? The elites. Some of us are behind all those kind of insinuations that one side is excluded because of this and that, or because they want to go and manage themselves. At the end of the day, they feel they will be economically better. For section to feel economically disadvantaged or politically disadvantaged, there must be an propagation of feelings, and these feelings are normally born by a long-term feeling of exclusion. But that does not mean that that particular feeling is true. So we have to go the extra mile through dialogue, as I said, through restructuring so that everybody will manage his own destiny. And the nation, somebody, the keyword speaker spoke about whether our system, the presidential system, is working, whether we should go parliamentary, so that an element of self-determination and self-actualization can be fostered by all those sprouting and spreading aspects or manifestation of self-actualization and so on and so forth. So managing diversity requires fidelity, it requires transparency, it requires the courage for the leadership to come forward and discuss the issue, not to put it on the side. Because certainly there are sponsors who are benefiting from those agitations. Unless we are able to confront it head-on, we are just going to be building round cyclical issues that we will not be able to overcome. Thank you.
Just very quickly.
I think the underbelly of diversity crisis lies in a very small economy. That Nigeria, thinks it's rich because we have this windfall from non-renewable asset from oil. But in actual fact, it's a very poor country. Brazil and Nigeria have comparative populations. The annual budget of Brazil is about 600 billion. Nigeria is budgeting between 30 and 40 billion US dollars every year for the same size of population. So it's obvious that it's a small economy, that the resources is not enough to go around the large number of people that need these resources. So there's competition for access to these resources. The professor who gave the keynote address talked about state capture by elites to corner resources. And that is what is going on in Nigeria, in many African countries. So to grow this economy, it is important for us to understand the responsibility for economic space management between federal and state government in a federal system. There's an exaggerated expectation from the federal government relative to states in this country, and we must shift the emphasis for demand for economic livelihood from federal into state governments. Because state governments, apart from being managers of political spaces, they are economic jurisdictions. And we must know what every state is contributing to the Commonwealth of Nigeria. That is why, for example, in the Office of Statistics of this country, there are 36 states. The disaggregation of our GDP data is only taking place in 20 to 22 states out of 36. The time has come for us to know what is all the states of the country contributing to the economy. And let there be economic competition between states. That is how to create jobs. That is how to create production. Because services, whether social or economic, the demand for services is in the states. That is where the population is. That's where rubber meets the road. That's why we are demanding for schools, for health. That's where jobs are needed. And we must shift the economic debate of this country as a sole responsibility of federal government into a shared responsibility between the federal and the state governments, and more importantly, with the states. This is the way that we can reduce conflict. The more resources that is available, the less conflict on resources that we have, the more peace we have, the less of grazing farmer conflicts, the less of banditry, as long as resources are available and it's equitably and judiciously distributed so that no one section of the country or the state is excluded, then we have a march to peace.
It seems to me that the major part of the solution going forward is what we do about the economic situation of the country. The management of crisis the management of the conflicts of diversity is also a management of who gets what. How do you see the resolution of this, and how do you see the management of these inclusions of persons, given that the economy itself is a very small one and is suffering from the many demands upon its limited resources?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Ambassador. The issue here is not just about, of course, economy, it's political economy, and the political system also will impact on that. So I think the solution also is, maybe I'm speaking as a lawyer, but of course that is the basis of any of the country, is also going back to the Constitution. And then the Constitution prescribes we run a federal system, but we don't practice physical federalism. And entrenching that with the principle of nationality that will downplay the ethnicity and ethnic divide, that will first also bring in that notion of inclusion and distributive justice. So I think we have to practice physical federalism, and states have to develop at their own pace. And that requires greater autonomy to the states and local government. In fact, these states should determine the status of local government. The states and local government, maybe federal and states. Because if you continue the way we are, cap in hand to Abuja, the center, one day they will come, in fact, and very soon they will come to Abuja and there won't be nothing to share. The commissioners of finance, the commissioners of finance that go there, one day they will come and nothing to share, and they will go back to their states. I think maybe that is the time when we have such meltdown economically that maybe we begin to think. Just think of what I just witnessed. I just watched CNN, and I saw Akwa Ibom State participating. That's your state, your state of marriage, participating in a fair in Dubai. And they were buying 10 more Boeings or something at the place. And meanwhile, Akwa Ibom just started this flight business. And everybody knows if there is Ibom Air, I will choose Ibom Air first. Because of what? Because they are rendering the services efficiently. And you know they will keep time. And now they're expanding and growing. So they are contributing. And I agree, we must look at what people bring into the Commonwealth in order to participate. Because it's a small economy. We need also not forget the women and the youth, because they must also be included. Because a democracy that is not engendered, or economy that is not engendered, will actually be endangered, will not survive. Thank you.
You've talked about restructuring. We've talked a lot about redistributive justice. We've talked about even knowing what the content of our diversity is. The Senator has said some of us need to know what each state is bringing and to create more competition within the states in order to rebuild. In your own suggestion, we need to go differently.
Polemics or semantics. This country has had so many discussions and dialogue on how to go forward. I remember what my president did when he was the president, the constitutional conference that was held, and a lot of suggestions were put forward on how to go on. Well, we are considered as a nation differently. I can go with the suggestion of the professor that state can go differently. But we must know as a nation, we have different configurations and peculiarities. And we must be our brothers' keepers. We cannot exacerbate the spread of poverty in some areas because of the disadvantage of geography or social condition. Education has never been the same. Social setting has never been the same. So I think it is the challenge of the leadership to harmonize all these differentials, to make sure that you bring people together in a manner that we will be our own brothers keepers. The kind of reform that we need in the system is to eschew corruption, to make sure that scarce resources are used very well, and that the states and local governments are working efficiently and some minimum of autonomy should be given. You cannot, for any reason, compare Bauchi and Akwa Ibom or Lagos, because you have different state economies. We have different realities. But certainly, if we are a federation, we might agree with and practice basically federalism, but with the things of human rights, that we should be our brothers keepers in a manner that we should not go in a journey and leave the rest behind. We must come with policy, we must come with structure, and that is why we need the last, but most important constitutional conference that will structure the country in such a manner that over-dependency on the center will be less, and that we will be generating IGR. IGR is the way to go for the state and local governments. They are no longer doing it. Even the leadership recruitment at the local government and the state are different. You see the chairman of a local government in Nkoyo being a doctor, but you might say he may not go to primary school. So the kind of outcome you are going to get for such a person is different. So we have to really carry ourselves alone in a manner that the senator said, free of most of this suspicion, but at the same time, lending a helping hand to each other, free of suspicion and mistrust. Thank you very much.
To build diversity management on the basis of leaving no one behind. I think that's what the governor of Bauchi State is saying. It's a federal system. In the morning we were told that the federal system has helped us to manage our diversity, and we have even exported some of our style of governance to other parts of the world. However, that same system is part of the problem. The keynote speaker spoke about interrogating some of these systems that we have. What is your last word on how we can manage, rebuild, rebrand, and remake our country and leaving no one behind? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to return to my initial comments about the activity of the former president in establishing the think tank of this nation. By that establishment, he has further shared the load of being a politician into that of increasing his stature as a statesman. And I think his moral bank account for objectivity and for nationalism is growing by reason of this initiative. And we would like him to take responsibility and leadership on the civil society side for the demand of good governance, improved federalism, further decentralization of a behemoth called the federal government, give more powers to the states, and encourage people to demand for good governance from subnational governments before asking the federal government to be the Father Christians of everything.
Civil society is being called to make demands and to answer to its name. Democracy has to be built and rebuilt. What would be your parting point?
Thank you. I think restructuring is imperative, and the constitutional reform is what was set that rolling. Accountability stakes need to be raised, and civil society will take also center stage, because as it were, demand is in shortfall. And I'm worried about the catastrophe of that diversity. I'm beginning to think that we lack the sophistication to even appreciate our diversity and mechanisms for managing that. And I think we might do, apart from I will support a research that look more into the historical perspective to bring out our commonalities rather than this emphasis on diversity. But again, when we talk of being our brothers or sisters keepers, it shouldn't be one-sided in certain aspects. We should also be concerned also when also certain group, like also my part of the world, and because I say self-determination because of what? Because we feel excluded completely from governance. And it's not wrong to say that. And others also that want to share in the Commonwealth should actually be championing that. To say no, also including because they are part of Nigeria. So that we can be proudly equity, justice, and principles of federalism, and especially the issue of non-discrimination and equality, because that is the basis of any democracy, of leaving no one behind. And if we don't do that, Nigeria has, I'm really glad that President Jonathan Goodluck are doing this. And I think Nigeria have, even more than America, the greatest number of living presidents. You can count yourself, President Obasanjo, President two from Niger State, and then from Angela, so why don't you people come together? Just be in a retreat. Only you people tell yourself the truth about what you missed during your time. And what was it that you didn't get right, and what with insight you should get right. And after staying one week talking, and what you see as the future of Nigeria, then you can invite your advisors to come and take note of what you appoint amongst yourself, secretaries and everything. Because now, we are lucky to have all of you. Time is now. I know President Gowan started doing the prayers, you are doing this seminar and dialogue. President is still preferring the international scene. We need to come home, and I know we commented, and we need to do this sooner than later. Thank you.
We need a council of the wise in Nigeria as well. It's been an honor to moderate this session. Thank you, Excellency, for reminding us that diversity is also geographical. It's not just a function of different ethnicities and religion, but some areas have less endowments than others, and that needs to come into the equation as we move forward. Senator, thank you so much for your conversations around the limitations of resources, the absence of data, the fact that the data we have is not disaggregated enough, the fact that we are quiet about those salient points that build up the diversity and make it more useful for us to work around. It's a great point that you have made there. And Professor Ezeilo, thank you for reminding us that this thinking and this dialogue has only begun. Many more of them have to happen. And we have called upon the leaders of our country, the former presidents, to come together and form a think tank of their own and generate ideas which can spew into the rest of the country and begin to give direction to the country. It's a moment in our history, one that we can take advantage of, and one we have time to run away and make sure we return our country to true federalism, true building and true development in our diversity. Like our anthem says, we are united, and it's a country that we're willing to work for justice to reign and to be available to all. Thank you so much for being part of this. It's been an honor to moderate this session.